And welcome into the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe you're finally kicking your feet up in your recliner, got a minute, sit back, relax while those little rascals are in bed or running around destroying the place. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Jay. I'm super excited to be joined by Jeremy and Zach today. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, doing great.
I'm excited that we were able to do this. Finally, it was a long time coming. And as I would direct quote from Instagram messages, we thought you should never ask. So excited to jump on and break this thing down with you. So before we jump in too far, it's October. All the things that are October are great. It's spooky. It's fun. It's chilly. It's kids are well in the swing of school, hopefully, and all those things. So love back to school time. And if you were with us during the month of September, then you know that the entire back catalog of the Young Dad podcast was published. And so we went from 100 episode 148 at the end of August to 172 by the end of September. So hope you enjoyed this last little bit, and I hope you enjoy everything that's to come here in October. The additions to the Young Dad podcast feed, I just want to announce that at the top. Biracial broadcast and patriarchy principles are also going to be coming during this month as well. So I'm super excited for those launches and for those additional passion projects to the line. And last little bit of news that I want to hit here at the top is we are on Patreon now, so you can join and become a patron legit for $1 a month. So if you got an extra dollar around that you love the podcast, feel free to support that way as well over on Patreon. You'll get early access to every single episode, unedited episode, unfiltered episodes, and just so much more good stuff. You'll have input on merch and so much more. So that's enough for the business here at the top. Gentlemen, I want to start off this podcast with asking you, what is a men's mental health hill that you are willing to die on?
That's a great question to start with. I was so prepared for the tell us your origin story, tell us about yourself. So kudos to you for having a creative kickoff to the conversation here. I think, like most things for me, it's the answer is always going to be consistency in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to be a good dad, it's showing up all the time, right? It's not just showing up when it's convenient for your schedule or when work's not too busy. If it's trying to get stronger, right? You got to go to the gym every day or multiple times a day or multiple times a week to to lift the weights and do the work. It's everything comes down to the small steps you need to take over a long period of time consistently to reach those goals, because showing up once in a while isn't going to get it done.
Yeah, but I'll throw in too that the other hill I would die on there's consistency, but there's also letting yourself off the hook when you fail, because even though you do need to be consistent as much as possible, sometimes you're going to miss. Sometimes you're going to have a failure. And on those occasions, you need to be lenient with yourself. You need to let yourself off the hook and allow for the next day of consistency to happen.
Agreed on both of those. So with consistency, when we think of consistency, at least when I think of consistency, I get tongue twisted even with that word. I think of just like showing up time and time again, right? Or doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. But sometimes that consistency, when we're doing the same thing over and over again, can make us feel like we're making no progress at the same time, right? So for you guys, what does that consistency look like? So in just all aspects of your personal life, your relationships with your kids, what does that look like for you?
I'll start with, it's being there 100%. So, being there for my daughter, it's got to be quality consistency as well. Being there for my daughter, if I'm on my phone and I'm checking work emails and I'm doing other things while spending time, big air quotes here, spending time with my daughter, it's not quality, right? So whatever it is you're doing, like, you need to do it with purpose and conviction that this is what you're doing. You're not distracted, and these are the things. Just showing up, being fully present and aware and there for what you're doing.
No,
I think for me,
agree with that. I like that.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think for me, it's prioritizing the kid, right? So like I'm very fortunate. I have a work from home job. I can kind of, adjust my schedule and do things to fit my lifestyle. So when my kid has to get to camp, I can schedule it in and get them there, right? I'm not at a place for a shift from 9 to 5. I'm fortunate in that way. But I think that some form of that has to translate to being a dad, whether it is, when I'm home at, after work at 5, I'm home at work after 5. I'm not watching Netflix unless it's like movie night with the kids. I'm not on my phone doom scrolling. I'm not, at the bar drinking with the guys. Like I'm there. I'm very, like Zach said, present for my kid. So I think that's it. It's just that they have to be the priority. And I agree that quality time is huge. I love Jerry Seinfeld's take on garbage time, like how just that nothing time when you're just together doing nothing there's so many memories I have of that uh, in some ways eclipse some of the big things. And like my kids will bring up memories of, oh, you remember that one time when we were driving to that place and that weird thing happened? Like it was such an inconsequential thing, but they rarely say, hey, remember that time we went to Disneyland and we went on the ride? Like they kind of talk about the small stuff. So I try to really just cherish that garbage time, that downtime where there's nothing spectacular happening, but like really soak up that this is what most of our experience is together. It's just this sort of time between things, and to not take it for granted.
No, I really like that. So it almost sounds like consistency is hand in hand for both of you with just being present and being there and being fully present in that moment. Well, additionally, I heard this recently while listening to another podcast. I don't remember what podcast I was listening to. I listen to so many podcasts in a day, but they were talking about time and how it came from how we're always looking for like quality time, right? We're so focused. We're like hyper focused on, okay, I got to spend quality time, quality time, quality time, quality time. So we miss out. Sometimes we're so focused on trying to spend quality time with our families, with our kids, with our significant other, that it ends up not being quality at all. It ends up being a disaster. Versus, well, what if we just focus more on the quantity of time? What if we just focus more on the quantity of the time that we're spending with these people? And then we just, out of that quantity, came our quality moments. Because it's not, if you're so focused on always trying to find the quality, then you're going to miss out on it, right? But it's that quantity, kind of like you were saying, Jeremy, where your kids remembered just driving in the car and the weird thing that happened. My kids are the same way. They'll remember just the randomest, littlest stuff that I did. Like, and I think about it, it's like, well, if we're just spending time together, even if we're all just sitting in a room and I'm still there and I'm present, but we're all still kind of doing our own thing. Maybe we're not talking. Maybe the kids are playing with their dolls or whatever the heck they're doing. It's like, I'm still there. We still have a quantity of time that we're spending. And then the quality of moment came later when I ripped my shirt off my chest, kind of thing, right? Which, true story, really happened. But
like
so
full Hulk Hogan style, like rip the shirt off and
full Hulk Hogan, the t-shirt. I don't know what happened. I was like getting really like worked up, and it wasn't mad or anything. I was just like playing around and like pretending, and then the pretending took a turn to real life and ripped
that game of Uno just went too far, and you hulked out and just lost it on them.
Yeah, I don't remember what we were doing, something like that, but it was just one of those moments, while we were just like spending time together. I think we were all just sitting down and relaxing, and I think the TV was on and the girls were doing their thing and me and my wife were just sitting, and like we just started playing, interacting, and then that quality moment came out of that. So those quality moments are birthed within that quantity of time. But I want to kind of read this other thing that I was looking up here about consistency as well. So it's like consistency is like the slow burn that ignites real change. It builds trust both in yourself and with others. When you show up regularly, whether for a workout, a project, or even a relationship, it creates a rhythm that others can count on. This predictability fosters reliability, allowing others to see you as dependable. And I think that's the big part here, right? So when you're consistently showing up, those that you're given that quantity of time to, know that you're reliable, you're dependable, and that you're there, and that they can open up. It goes from, you're always trying to do grand gestures, like you're trying to do the Disneyland, right, to make those moments, to where it goes to those small ones, those repeated actions that are just going to stack up over time, where it becomes habits of self-discipline, and it reduces like decision, like fatigue, right, where your kids are like, well, no, I have to choose when I can talk to dad, when I can talk to mom, when I can talk to whoever, the adults in my life, to now they're like, oh, well, I know you're always there, so this is way easier for me to have a conversation. It's way easier for me to approach you. It's way easier for me to talk to you because I know you're always there. Yes, we could be doing nothing, but I know you're always there. There's more time available for me versus kids always having to wait and pick and choose. Like, okay, when is that time, like, for me, kind of thing. So
yeah, no, I 100% I agree. Like consistency, and always being there. Like that's one of my goals as a dad. Like I kind of joke that I want to be so there for my kids that like they're sick of me and want me to go away. Like I want to be a presence in their life that they know when things are bad, they can come to me. When things are good, they can come to me. When they're bored, they can come to me. And it's the you were talking about presence and just being present in the moment. Like that to me is central to almost everything in life. Like we spend so much time planning for the future and regretting the past that we miss the present, which is when, it's the only moment you really have. Everything else is an altered memory of the way something actually went, or it's a fear or a prediction of the way something's going to go that it won't actually go. But now is all there really is. So if you can make now the center of your attention, you can really make the most of it and see those opportunities to rip off your shirt and go Hulk Hogan and make them laugh and create that memory for them. When we're sitting there, like I said, like you're playing Uno, but you're thinking about, oh, I've got to be at this meeting at 7:00 in the morning. What am I going to do? Like you're missing what's happening now because you're anticipating something that's not even going to go however you're anticipating it going. So it's really, it's just so important. It was such a huge life-changing moment for me to realize how much is happening in the present and how much I'm not there for it. It's when I first became a dad, I was talking to a musician about his experience as a dad. I just asked him for his advice, and this was early on when the kid was in the cradle, and I just remember him saying, like, just soak it up, like those moments when you're in their room trying to get them to sleep. Just be there, because those moments will be gone so fast and you'll miss them so much. And I've taken that now for 13 years. Even now, when I'm in my 13-year-old's room, trying to help her get to sleep, or I'm helping her with her homework, or taking her to, softball practice, I'm just trying to soak up that car ride, that moment, because it's going so fast. Like, in 5 years, she's going to be an adult and likely move away to college. Like, she won't live in my house anymore. That's so crazy to think about, how it feels like yesterday I was in the room with her in her crib trying to help her sleep. So just, whatever it is, whether it's being a parent or a spouse or whatever role you have, just try to live now, because yesterday and tomorrow are just imaginations. And this is really all there is right now.
I was trying to think of like something really like, clever and clairvoyant to add to everything he just said, but it's just like, yeah, I agree. That's it.
It's a controversial opinion, I know, but yeah.
But I think about that stuff often lately anyway. Again, my daughter's 13 as well. And FYI, Jeremy, I think you've succeeded. Like your kids are sick of you. Like you're there so often.
Oh, I'm pretty sure.
Definitely sick of you. But that's it. Like I have, I've heard other parents complain, like, when I get in the car, all my kid does is put their headphones in and they just listen to music. And I've learned to love that. Like it's just a car ride. They're listening to music. We're not talking. There's nothing happening. But every now and again, like I see the music gets paused, and I get a, "Hey, Dad, I was thinking," and then some conversation comes out of it. So like, yeah, I agree. Like that quantity bit, it's real. Like you just got to be there. You got to be around them. You got to put yourself in that moment, and the times will come. I have, you can't force quality. Like you just can't. Like it's going to be fake. It's going to be, there's too much pressure on it, right? It's got to be that natural progression. So yeah, I agree with that. The quantity, you just put it there and it's there.
I want to share a quick story about that forcing quality thing. When my now 13-year-old daughter was 2, we took her to Disney World. And, did all the stuff, went to all the parks in 4 days, like, marathon days, open to close, all the parks, all the stuff. And one of the things we did was, because it was her birthday, we took her to one of the restaurants for like a theme party, like a princess theme party or whatever. And, all the princesses paraded her around the restaurant and all the things. And then Snow White brought her a cupcake and she ate the cupcake. Whirlwind, amazing trip to Disney World. At the end of it, we asked her, what was your favorite part of the whole trip? And she said, the cupcake. And it was such a lesson of like, we spent so much money and so much time to like go create these incredible memories, which we have, and I cherish, and they're worth every penny. But I literally could have gone to the store and bought her a $3 cupcake, and she would have thought that was the coolest thing, right? Like, so it's just like Zach said, those things you try to force. Sometimes it works, but often it's just the little things. It's just the small things that you think are inconsequential that will make the biggest impact.
Right. And we put that back in perspective for like us as adults, right? Like, think about it. We don't perspective it nearly enough, I feel, because we're like, okay, let's go big, let's make these memories kind of things. But then think about it for you. What are the things that you remember? What are the things that you as an individual remember from your childhood or from your teenage years or from early adulthood with your people, like with your dad, with your mom, if you're fortunate enough to be raised by them and have them around, or maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's an aunt. For me, as a grandma, an uncle, and an aunt, or with a cousin, or with a significant other, or just with like some of your college buddies, right? What are those like moments that you remember? Like, you asked me, like, what do I remember about college? I remember playing NCAA 13 in our apartment, and there was this one day that, and me and my buddy, he still knows about it. He got an earful when NCAA 25 came out. I texted him like, "Did you get it? Do you have a next gen console? Are we gonna run this thing back?" He's like, "I know exactly what you're talking about." He's like, "No," but one of the few of my best memories from college were when we would go to the basketball courts and we would just go against each other, play horse, and we would just play for hours on end, just playing ball, talking together. Uh, we would play games. We played Halo. We played just other games just in our apartment when we should have been doing homework or studying or something. Or just these little going to Taco Bell after church on Sundays, or just all these random things, right? Those are the things I remember. Not any of the big things I probably should remember. The courses, the big things that we were supposed to remember, right? Or I remember when we were playing like NCAA and somehow got it on video. I juked the crap out of him in a game, and I won that game against him. We were having like an apartment like tournament, and so I ended up winning the tournament, juked him out, and then went back, replayed it, recorded the video, and it was just super, super fun. It's one of those things like just encapsulates the memory. He knew exactly what I was talking about before I even like explained to him what it was, and so it's like those are the things that as the kids say, live rent free in your head. And so it's all those little moments, like with the kids, like, yeah, we can go on these vacations, but what they're going to remember the cupcakes. They're going to remember these things, and that's what they're going to focus on. And, it's great that they do. And I think, Zach, what you were saying too, to talk about that, like, yes, they get in the car and they listen to music, right? But that's a form of coping, right? That's a form of them processing, getting through their day, right? Again, it goes back to this perspective I'm trying to get at. Like, they're little humans, right? They're little people, maybe not legit little people, but they're small. I don't want to say small-minded because they have a brain too, but you know what I mean. There's no good way to say this. They're children. Thank you.
Developing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Developing brains, developing humans. And so, but those brains, they need time.
They're idiots. Come on, kids are idiots. Let's be honest.
Hey, don't quote Madam Vice President like that, okay? This isn't patriarchy principles. If we want to jump into patriarchy principles, more than happy to. There's enough of that talk over there about her negatively, but thank you for that direct quote there. Much appreciated. Hey, but her words, not mine, right? Where was I though? Man, that threw me off. I love that. Was so perfect. Anyways, let's talk about failure while we're talking about the topic.
Yeah.
Moving to that, because I mean, she encapsulates failure as it is. But so yes, I live in Washington. Yes, I live on the West Coast, but my views may not be your views. But failure, kind of like Zach mentioned earlier, we have to give ourselves room to failure, right? And failure, so often, especially for men, that is our mortal enemy in life. Failure is the enemy. It's often painted as that, especially for men. If you fail, your life's over, pretty much. But it's actually one of our greatest teachers, right? Where we can learn from within the failure. So allowing ourselves room to fail, for me at least, means embracing the messiness of growth. Get it? Messiness? Get it? Play on There you go.
Well played. Well played.
So it recognizes that missteps are a part of the learning process, right? Because if our kids fail or we fail, we have two choices, pretty much, right? We can either sulk in that failure and let it destroy us, or flip side of the coin, we can learn from it and move forward from it and get better from it. So we can either get better or worse from it. So when you give yourself permission to fail, we are also granting ourselves the freedom to explore, experiment, and stretch beyond our comfort zones.
I can speak to it because, I mean, probably 95% of my life has been failure, right? It's just all over the place. And you're right, it is detrimental. I think I've, the message that every single one of my therapists have ever gotten is, I don't feel good today. Why? Well, I did something really small and stupid at work. Okay, how's that make you feel? I feel like I'm going to get fired. And if I get fired, I won't be able to provide for my family. And if I can't provide for my family, I'm going to be homeless and my family will leave me and no one will love me and I'll be down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that snowball went downhill quick.
For the most inconsequential of failures. And it's taken me a long, long time. My dad used to say, right or wrong, like he used to say this phrase to me because I would do something, it wouldn't be right, and then I'd have to do it again. And he would say, if you're going to do it right the first time. I do agree with that statement, but at the same time, my developing, aka idiotic brain as a child, took that as I have to do it perfect every single time. No matter what, you can't fail, right? So I grew up thinking I have to do it perfect every single time. So it's a good statement and a bad statement, and in the context. But now, whenever I do fail, like it's always disappointing, but I try and look for the positive of it. I think Jeremy has always, seen me do this where this really bad thing happened. But on the flip side, I got this out of it, or this happened and I learned I really didn't want to do this. And I try and have those conversations with my daughter too of, oh, well, that sucks that you failed at this. What did we learn? Like, how can you take that and push it towards the next goal, the next thing that you're going to do? What they say in Apollo 13, failure is not an option. Honestly, failure is a requirement. Like, you're never really going to learn anything unless you fail. Like, there's so many quotes out there. Now they're all popping into my head, right? I didn't learn how to create a light bulb. I learned 100 different ways not to create a light bulb, right? It's just an iterative process. And, but as a man, like, you really do feel like that is who you are. Like, you have to do it right the first time. I have, teams at work that I, talk to all the time, and they're like, I really don't want to fail. And I'm like, I'm okay with you failing. You can make mistakes. You can fail. It's if you don't learn from that mistake or you make the same mistake again, that's where there's a problem. So like, you got to shift your focus to, I'm going to fail. It's always going to happen. How do you react to it? How do you get back up? How do you do the thing better? That's the more important part than the actual failure in my mind.
No, I agree. 100%.
I don't know if I answered your question or not, but.
No, you did. It's great. Because it leads me right into kind of the next point here that I was thinking, like, failure strips away the illusions of perfection. When you're allowing yourself to fail, you strip away that illusion of perfection. Like, I heard that saying growing up too. I was raised by my grandmother. So my grandmother's from the mid-1900s, as Gen Z or Gen X or whatever the gen is today that's out there. But if you're from the 1900s, you're old. She's from the mid-1900s. So old, according to the kids today. But failure strips away that illusion of perfection. I heard that same saying. If you're going to do it right the first time. Which creates for the idiotic brain a resemblance of fail. You have to be perfect. If you don't do it perfect, then it's wrong. So every little point you get wrong in school feels like it's 10x, right? It's 10 times worse, 100 times worse. If you actually fail an assignment in school, then it's like, my life's over. I'm never going to college. I don't know how many times that was depicted in like cartoons and stuff. Like, I failed one assignment. I'm never going to college, yada, yada, yada. And then the friend comes, Tommy Pickles comes over and says, you're not a failure, Angelica, yada, 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 and brings her back up. Because Tommy Pickle is the wisest monk of the bunch. But failure, it humbles us, right? It can humble us. It can teach us resilience. And it can help someone understand like what doesn't work. Like, and it's crucial knowledge on the path to finding what does. If we don't do that, if we don't learn how to fail, if we don't allow ourselves to be humbled by it, to be taught by it, and to help us understand what doesn't work, then we're going to be in the same place we are right now. And it can lead to us feeling worse, or it can lead to us just feeling like really bullheaded. It's like, nope, I'm right. My way works. My way is the only way. This is the only way. Was it Edison that invented the light bulb, right? If he would have just done the first model, right? The first couple models, like, oh, nope, this is right. This is going to work. This way is going to work 100 times. We wouldn't have had lights when we did, right? It took them 100 times to get there. So it's a process. We have to let it teach us, like the failure teach us. And the space for failure nurtures, and this is something beautiful about space for failure, especially like my oldest daughter. She loves art. She's very artistic. And she loves it. Sometimes she messes up and she has to throw it away, like her drawing away. But, the space for failure nurtures her creativity and innovation. It makes her reset. It makes her rewind. It makes her try again. And sometimes, rarely, hopefully this happens more and more, but it makes her slow down a little bit. It makes her take her time, which she's great at what she does. She's a beautiful, wonderful, smart little girl. But sometimes she rushes. That's her like Achilles heel, so that makes her lose points or fail things and get things wrong. So she has to go back and redo them because she wants to get it right, and she wants to do it, and she wants to move on to the next thing. But when she has to do it again, it really makes her get creative. It really makes her start asking more questions, ask for a picture, ask for a reference, makes her think more. And so I love that. And it just removes the fear, of getting things wrong. Like, yes, it makes it okay to get things wrong. It makes it okay to change things, to get things wrong, and to learn and to grow. Because if we don't fail, we don't learn and grow, then we're never become the best version of ourselves. And our kids are never going to become the best versions of themselves if we're not encouraging them to fail, allowing them to fail, picking them up when they do fail, and being there for when they do essentially fall down. So.
Well, and I think also it's our responsibility to fail publicly for them, like to fail in front of them and to show them how we bounce back and show them how we get up and try again and how we learn from that lesson. Because otherwise, you mentioned the fear, right? Like if they see mom and dad are always perfect, mom and dad are never wrong, they get everything right the first time, they're going to set that expectation for themselves as well. And just yesterday, I was at softball practice with my kids, and they were practicing sliding, and they got out the big, the big tarp, hosed it down, so there was like a big slip and slide. And some of the kids just dove in head first, loved it, ate it up, and there were a couple kids that were scared. My kids were hesitant; they weren't scared, but they were hesitant to do it because they hadn't done anything like that, at least not for a while. And there was one kid in particular, not mine, but one that was like, she was literally running away from it. Like we had to chase her to get her to come back. We had to bribe her to try it because she was afraid. She was afraid to try. And there was a couple of them that were having this experience of just like this fear. And I just was asking them, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Oh, I'm going to flop. Okay, so, well, then I'll be embarrassed. Why? Everyone here is cheering for you to do this, knowing you're going to suck the first time, knowing it's going to go badly. Like nobody's going to go out there and do that the first time and just like nail it. The kids that are nailing it have been doing this since they were 4, right? Like you have to just get out there and try and fail a lot so that you are good later. Like you're never going to be good at anything the first time unless you're just, incredibly lucky, naturally gifted, whatever. But those unicorns, that's for other people. The rest of us have to work for it and have to suck and have to fail. Speaking of quotes, there's one of the new Pearl Jam songs. Eddie Vedder says, fear of failure is the same as being afraid to try. Like it's the same. You have to conquer that fear to get on the other side of it, to learn that, there's a lesson to pull from that. And all of those failures will add up to evidence that you can overcome hard things. And whatever that is, you can get better at that. The next time you're afraid of something, you can go back to that memory and go, I was afraid then and I beat it. I'm afraid now and I can beat it. So you just have to really lean into that fear and that failure and learn all of the lessons that it has to teach, because it really is our best teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the greatest thing in life. Oh, go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to add to that, like he said, putting your failures out there. On a pretty regular basis, and this is not easy for me because, I make mistakes at work all the time and I get into trouble and, not really trouble, but like I make mistakes and you have to deal with those consequences. And my dad and men all over the world would like make those mistakes and they'd come home and, how was work? Fine. And you don't hear about it. So I very consciously, and it's very uncomfortable for me, but like I regularly talk about it and be like, oh, I screwed up at work today. What? Really? What'd you do? Did you lose your job? And that's where my daughter goes right away. And I'm like, no, I didn't lose my job, but here's what I did wrong. And this is how I'm going to fix it. Like I learned something from it and this and that. Like again, it's very hard for me to do because I don't like being wrong. I don't like failing. I don't like any of that stuff on top of the taboo topic of, men being wrong and all that stuff. But I do it on purpose to Jeremy's point. Like you have to do it. You have to show them that you make mistakes, that you're not perfect, that you're human, that it's okay to do these things. And like one other thing, like the sliding into the base, whenever we're in that situation, well, they've done it 100 times, right? That's why they're good at it. But if they've done it 100 times, that means they had to have a number one time, a first time. And the first time they did it, they probably sucked too. So like everything he said is amazing there. Like just, you have to show people that it's okay to fail. And unless you set that example yourself, your children, the people who work with you, and like, if you don't show that example, they're all going to be afraid to do it. But I've literally seen people transition from I have to be perfect, I have to be perfect to talking about their failures openly and growing from it. So it's got to be public. It's got to be out there.
Agreed. And I don't know how you do it, Zach, but you're like a wizard. You're like reading my next thought of next point I was going to move to here in the podcast. But before we do, I want to just mention, I heard this Will Smith quote. The greatest things in life are on the other side of fear, right? That door of fear. Some of the greatest things in life are on the other side of that door. Having kids, the other side of that really scary door. Some of the greatest things in life, right? For us as dads, when it comes to relationships, things like that, friendships, podcasting, all the different things that we do in our life, there was a first time, like Zach mentioned, there's that fear where we want to run away, where we don't want to do it. And so, the greatest things in life are on the other side of fear. When we take that leap, when we open that door, when we walk through it, there's something beautiful about that as well. And Zach, I'm gonna go back to what you said here. You mentioned how a lot of men would come home and we just say we're fine. Feelings I'm not talking about, or feelings I'm not expressing. There we go. If you want to make fine into an acronym here, I work in mental health. So one of the biggest issues in men's mental health is the stigma around expressing vulnerability and seeking help, where it's so much easier to say I'm fine. And a lot of men were taught from a very young age to man up, essentially suppress emotions and avoid showing weakness, avoid showing that vulnerability, avoid showing, those expressions, avoid saying, yeah, I'm fine, versus, yeah, I messed up today. And then getting that bombarded with those questions. And for some reason, I don't know why, but kids always think the worst. My daughters are like that too. Did you get fired? Did you get in an accident? Or something's like, no, I'm fine. Just like, let me tell you what happened. Like, just give me a second. But the cultural expectation can lead to a reluctance to talk about our struggles, whether it's anxiety, depression, or stress, which in turn can result in feelings of isolation or resorting to unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse, which is very often. So what's your guys' take on this topic here, on not expressing the vulnerability and seeking help? Because if it's not the number one issue, it's probably a top 3 issue when it comes to men's mental health.
Yeah, I know Jeremy has, a similar answer as far as like, being raised. It's, you, as a boy, you fall down. I know, like when my daughter falls over, immediately I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? Is everything okay? But when a boy falls over, it's not, are you okay? It's, you're fine. It's not a question. It's a statement. And I've seen it happen with, my girlfriend's son as well. Like it's so different how that works. And I know Jeremy's had some experience with that too. And like watching the difference between boys and girls and like what happens when they fall over. And it's the same thing with, with the mental health stuff. We are taught to just be fine. And it's not okay to complain, or there's a, complaining is a good thing. We could probably go on complain. I think we actually did a whole podcast on the word complaining, but it's not okay to show your vulnerability, to show your weakness, that you made a mistake, that these things happen. Like with my daughter, like I make very conscious efforts to, when she's talking to me and I'm not in a good place, or I'm feeling depressed, or I'm anxious, like I literally tell her, I'm like, I'm not in a good place right now. I'm a little depressed. And then she asks me why, and I tell her, and like all of a sudden I feel better because I just got it out. But it's unfortunately the only way to get through those things. And continuing to say you're fine, it's just going to build up and build up and build up and build up. And then you pop and something happens. Somebody gets hurt. You hurt somebody, you hurt yourself, something gets hurt. And like those worst fears of, I lost my job, I can't provide for my family. Yeah, those can come true because you popped and you started drinking alcohol or using drugs or like doing all these things. So, I'm fine can lead to your worst fear that you're thinking of. But the thing is that none of us can get through this alone. Like, we don't have the answers. We need help. You need coaches. You need therapists. You need all these people. And the only way those people show up is if you're vulnerable and you talk about it. I've said it a million times. Every single time I outwardly express to anyone any issue that I'm having, they know a person, or they can help me directly, or the help that you need in that moment shows up because you said something, because it got put out there. And I'm sorry, my ego is not so big that I, have to keep everything in and I'm going to be perfect and do everything myself. I would love to. My ego would love to. My ego thinks it can do anything. But you have to. You're never going to get better. You're never going to get those little incremental bits and pieces of help that you need, or modeling to the next person that this is normal. This is normal to feel depressed today and happy tomorrow and anxious the next day and like a piece of shit one. Like, it's just all over the place. So you have to model it for yourself, for other people. But yeah, no, it's taboo. Like, as men, we were just raised, you're fine. Oh, your arm fell off? You're okay.
You're right.
Right?
You're all right.
Yeah, I don't know if it's hardwired into us, what that means, whether it's nature or nurture, but there is something for guys, at least my generation, myself, that example you gave, Zach. I mean, I literally did that. I was out hiking with friends. I have 2 daughters. If any of them fell over, I would be the one like, oh, are you okay? It's going to be okay. Hug them, make them feel better. But my friend's son fell and lost his mind. Just like started crying. And my first thought was, oh, come on, kid, toughen up. And I'm a pretty like sensitive, open, like I'm a mental health advocate. And here I am, have my own first reaction is, what's wrong with you, kid? Get up and, rub some dirt on it. Let's go. Like, everything that I say is wrong with men's mental health. I'm sitting there thinking it as my first reaction to the situation. So whether I learned that, whether there's something in my DNA that goes back to caveman days, I don't know. Probably a combination of both. But it spills over into when it's spoken, right? Or when that's our reaction publicly to people. I just interviewed this guy, John Nelson, on one of our episodes. I think it's number 265. And he was talking about, just social media, right? Like just complete toxic wasteland of hate. And if a man goes online and shares that they're struggling, that they're, just sharing their emotions, whatever tough thing they're going through, they'll be met with, toughen up, you wuss, you suck, like, man up, bro, like whatever it might be. His opinion, I don't know that I'm 100% in his camp, but it's an interesting thing to think about, is that those people are complicit to murder. For all of the men that commit suicide because they go down this mental health trap, this mental health path of just like, I'm not good enough, I'll never be worth anything, and then they end up killing themselves because of this stigma that they can't get help. The people that contribute to that, he believes, are complicit to murder, which, again, maybe a bit extreme, but it's something to think about, that your actions, when you do tell that person who's trying to share their humanity, that they need to toughen up, that they need to man up, that they're somehow not enough for having human emotions, is contributing to the stigma. And that stigma does kill thousands of men every year. So complicit, I don't know, but it's certainly not helping to contribute to the dialogue of, you're not good enough, you're somehow less than because you have emotions, because you have depression, because you have anxiety, because you have demons you're wrestling with, and really just need the right help. And sometimes it takes years to find it, but being told to man up or toughen up certainly is not going to get you there.
No, not at all. It doesn't help. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the man that's struggling. It doesn't help the person saying it, because that person's essentially, I feel like those people that are on the other side of that in the comment section on those posts and whatnot that are saying those things are the ones that are desperate to be able to do the same. And so they're projecting their same feelings, and they're also trying to say, hey, this guy needs help. I'm going to comment on this post too. I also need help. But they're going about it the wrong way because we don't know, as men, we're not essentially taught, how to handle these things. We're essentially taught, and we feel like we need to handle everything on our own, leading to like untreated mental health issues, untreated mental health issues. So because we're taught to do everything on our own. So there's a way that we can turn this vulnerability into a strength, right? I'm all about, the program I work in mental health, we're all about turning our needs into strength, or finding a strength that we already have to utilize to help our own needs. So we can turn our vulnerability into a strength by simply embracing it as a tool for connection and growth. I know it's that simple, that we can turn it into that by embracing it as a tool for connection and growth. So when men, when we open up about our fears, our insecurities, our past mistakes, we can find others that relate. If you want to, there's a great Facebook group that I recommend. I would recommend the Bluey Bandits group on Facebook. It's like 100,000 men. And then we have like a Featherwood group, and we have like these other like subgroups of that group. But the Featherwood group is like the emotion side of it, like the mental health side of it and whatnot. So it's really cool. Like these men and stuff, they post like anonymously, and they're just like pouring out their feelings. And these men in the comments are like not dragging them. Like the one place on social media I've seen, like, we don't drag each other. It's like, oh, well, here's this thing. Like I commented on a post once that was like, brother, you have postpartum depression. Like if you're saying you hate your kids, you hate being a dad, you need to go see someone before this spirals into something worse, kind of thing. So there's practical, there's just relate stuff. It's like, yeah, man, I'm going through that too. So feeling not alone, which is the whole point of Facebook groups and whatnot. So it creates deeper bond and more authentic relationships. Like I have a guy that I interviewed on the podcast some months ago, and we talk fairly often. His name's Brian, and we talk fairly often. And I just messaged him probably a week or so ago. Like I was struggling with something just like in my head, and he ended up sending me a message back, and we went back and forth a little bit. And it was just one of those things. It's like, man, we were brought together through this podcast so that we could be there for each other, kind of thing. So now we have like a really good friendship, really good relationship, him and I. So share these vulnerabilities and can dismantle the facade. I was gonna say facade, but facade, perfection, and replace it with realness, inviting trust and respect from others. When we get real with each other, when we break it down, when we get down to the nubs, and we're like, man, I'm struggling, kind of thing. Maybe it's over a drink, maybe it's over a conversation, maybe it's next to a fire, maybe it's just on a walk, anything like that. But being willing and vulnerable to open up to someone is really hard for men. But finding those people that you can do it with, finding those other men that you can do it with, right? Because if you're in a relationship, you're married and whatnot, you have a girlfriend, you probably shouldn't do it with other women. That can lead down a whole nother path that you don't want to go down. So finding those other men that are supportive in your life that you can do it with. And of course, if you're going to be vulnerable with someone and expect them to be open and receptive to you, make sure that you are willing to do the same for them before you even do it. That's kind of like the one-on-one, because you don't want to ask for something that you're not willing to give back. That's a rule I teach my kids. Like, don't ask for something that you're not willing to give. So just really important to keep that in mind too. But vulnerability also fosters self-awareness. It forces us essentially to confront our emotions honestly, leading to healthier ways of coping and personal development. And many men, we will then find what we own as our story, right? With that vulnerability comes the parts that we question, that we're like, okay, why did I feel this way? What made me feel this way? How did I get here? Things like that. And so we are able to own all the ups and downs of the story. And we feel more empowered after that, not less. So that's kind of my take on the vulnerability here, and how we can turn it into something useful and real and that we can use every day. So
well, I mean, that's literally what Zach and I did. When we first met, we were both about to become new dads, and our wives his wife at the time, my wife, were participating in a triathlon training to, run a triathlon shortly after they gave birth, which, was ridiculous and amazing. But because they were spending time together, they became friends and found out that, their husbands both liked Star Wars and the Seahawks and all these things. And so clearly we had to be best friends. And so they got us together.
Women do that. I love how women do that. It's like, oh, you guys have two things in common, best friends. That literally happens at work with me, with my one of my coworkers. She's like, oh yeah, you and my husband you'd be best friends. You guys both like sports and this other thing and these three things. It's like, so you think we'll be best friends because of the three things we have in common? She goes, yeah.
Well, in this case, here we are, 6 to 7 years later doing a podcast about this stuff. But, when we first met, it was like, so did you catch the game? How about that other inconsequential thing in life that doesn't really matter, but it's the small talk you have to have, right? Sizing each other up, trying to figure out, who is this guy? A few brunches and events later, and all of a sudden we're
you guys went to brunch together.
Of course, yeah. It was lovely.
Yes. We didn't organize it though. That's for sure.
Right. We just show up. But you start to sort of test the waters of, once the kid's there, it's like, are you guys sleeping? How's that going for you? How are you feeling with that? Are you stressed out about this? Like, just kind of like this, edging our way into a more vulnerable, open conversation. And I will never forget, there were two key moments in our friendship. One was we were at a mutual friend's birthday party, and my social anxiety just crippled me. Like, I was going through a lot of stuff, and I had to leave the room. I had to go out and just sit in the car, sitting there for a few minutes, and and then all of a sudden Zach's knocking on the window saying, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And I was able to open up and just say, like, I'm kind of losing my shit here, and be real with him. And then, some months later, we're out on a camping trip. We're sitting around the fire early in the morning, having coffee and talking about, like, Zach had just lost a ton of weight, and I was doing some different, like, kind of biohacking stuff to try and take better care of myself. And we started kind of swapping stories of what's worked and what hasn't. And I implemented some of the things that he suggested. He implemented some things I suggested. And we both started to see success in the goals we were trying to reach, and realized, like, we don't really have this with other guys, and we don't really hear other guys talking about this. And it was actually Zach's idea to do this podcast. And I thought, that's completely nuts. Like, I'm in no position to give anybody advice, and certainly not to do a podcast about it. But, we realized, like, the conversations we were having with each other were valuable and were helping us. And so if we could help each other, maybe, there's guys out there that were going through the same thing, that wanted to, that wanted to hear that same advice, that wanted to have that space, but didn't really have it. And so that's really what launched the show that we've now been doing for years. And I agree, like, men don't have that. But I do want to challenge your opinion on not talking to women about your feelings, because most of our audience, we do a men's mental health podcast, and most of our audience is the wives and girlfriends of the guy, right? And they're I would listen to this.
That space is fine. Like, the girlfriend, the wife, like, that's a good space. I meant women outside.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
That. That's what I was trying to get at. If it was outside of that, yes, 100% rely on your girlfriend, rely on your wife. Like, that should be your number one person, without a doubt. Sorry, I understand how that came off.
I wanted to test that. I wanted to make sure.
Your mom's fine, your sister's fine, your grandma's fine, your aunt's fine, kind of thing like that. Use those women that are, like, strong, good role models for you in your life, but not the girl at work, right? Not the neighbor lady kind of down the street, right? Like, that should be, that kind of emotional bonding connection should be reserved for your wife, for your girlfriend, kind of thing. So that's what I was getting at there.
I think it depends, because, I mean, like Zach was saying, that, the sort of the more you open up about the things you struggle with, the more that you can find the answers. And so, I'm sure there's a line, right? Like, you don't want to get to a point where you're creating an intimate relationship with somebody where it's not appropriate. But I certainly don't think you necessarily need to hold back the reality of your situation from people you're trying to connect with. You are trying to create a bond with friends, right? So
I think it's just, you're right. It's important to know your lines there. Know your lines. Know where those boundaries are.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You need to be very, very careful with those. I do have a few female friends who I am, open and honest and vulnerable with, and we actually, talk about these things together. And I've had to break off a couple of friendships because it crossed the line. And I couldn't go there, because I was already in a romantic relationship. So absolutely, it can go there, and you have to be very careful about it. But there are advantages, in my opinion. There are advantages to like, talking to another man who, right? Jeremy and I, two caveman-y type guys talking about feelings and vulnerability. Neither one of us know what the hell we're talking about. Females, on the other hand, have always had this, much better handled a hand on it than men. So if you can find that person that you can be open and honest with, that's a female, like it gives you a contrast that you just can't get from another man. So, I mean, like I seek out female therapists very specifically because they're female. Male therapists don't help me out as much. Like they give you a whole different picture. But you're absolutely right, 150% right. If you create an emotional bond with another female that is not your significant other, there is a big, big danger there, and you have to be very, very careful.
Yeah. I think that's more of what I was trying to get at. Like, just be careful there. But we're gonna wrap this thing up, gentlemen. I need to make my wife some coffee, so I'm gonna close this out real quick, and then I have one last question for you both to answer before we wrap up here. So I'm going to bring back our little beat here. So our opening closing beats are brought to you by the Podbeat app. Podbeat allows you to add a beat to any podcast or audiobook to enhance it. So if you guys like working out, if you guys like exercise, things like that, Podbeat has you covered. You can create it to match your cadence, to match your beats per minute, whatever all those science workout things that you like to do. Podbeat has you covered there. Absolutely fantastic. Also, additional shout out to other partners of the podcast, which you can find on the new revamped website, youngdadpod.com. You can find our affiliations with For Fathers Apparel, the best dad polos in the game. You can find it with Dad Bod Apparel, the best dad hats in the game, like I'm wearing today. And you can also find additional brands and whatnot that we're working with. And if you so happen to be a brand and you're like, man, this podcast is amazing, well, you can reach out to us via email there as well. Just follow the description of the episode. And of course, last but not least, please, would love if you support us over on Patreon. Support myself over on Patreon, support the podcast. Great way to get involved, support the podcast, show your love, show your support there. And yeah, so last question here for you both. Let's say a young father comes to you. Let's say he's, 18 to 22 years old. Doesn't even have a frontal cortex developed. I became a dad at 22. My brother became a dad at 19, 20 years old. So we were both super young when we became dad. Let's say he comes to you guys, and he's just like, he's nervous, he's scared, he can't even get the words out. Obviously, he's looking for advice. What is one piece of advice that you would give that young dad?
I think I'll echo the advice that I got from Chris Ballou, from the President of the United States of America, when I asked him. I mentioned it earlier. Just soak it up, man. Like, just be there. When you are with that kid, you have no idea how fast it's going to go. I mean, it when you're in it, it feels like forever. And then you blink and they're 7. You blink again, they're 10. You blink again, they're in middle school. Like, I cannot stress enough. Like, I was just reading, I was scrolling before we got on the call here, and somebody posted this thing about, sometimes I miss the younger version of my kids because I want to go back and correct everything I did wrong and all these things. And it didn't land for me at all. Like, I had the opposite reaction of, like, I've tried to so be there and so much just soak up every moment. I don't really have regrets. I mean, sure, there's things I could have done better, but I don't regret them because I was fully present and have always just tried to make it a priority to be there and experience them now, whatever now is. So whether they're in the crib, whether they're at T-ball, whether they're, going into middle school, like, just be in that moment. Don't worry about what's going to happen in high school. Don't worry about what's going to happen when they go off to college. Don't regret what happened, the stupid thing you did before that you probably still need to go and apologize to them for. Apologies are huge. Like, always apologize when you screw up, to teach your kids that it's okay to apologize. But it's just that, just be present. Just soak up that garbage time and just love it, because it will be gone before you know it.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and I'll my answer is very short. It's go easy on yourself. You're going to make mistakes. That kid's going to bounce back. There's not a whole lot that you can do that's going to permanently damage that kid. And what you do that permanently damages the kid, there's therapy for. So, go easy on yourself.
I love that. Well, gentlemen, thank you for this conversation. It's been great. The people can find you on all the socials, it looks like, at Fit Mess Guys, FITMESSGUYS. So shout out to you on the branding there. It's super nice when it's all the same thing on all the social media. So that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. there for you guys for the social medias. Make sure that, and of course, podcast as well. Fit Mess Guys, correct?
Thefitmess.com.
Fitmess.com as well. And then for the podcast, everyone can search just Fit Mess Guys, and they'll find you on their favorite podcast player.
Probably Fit Mess. The guys was kind of a social media thing that we had to do to make that work. So yeah, so just search the Fit Mess and you'll find us.
Love it. Well, while you're there, guys, make sure you go while you're leaving 5 stars in a review and comments on this podcast. Make sure you go over there as well. Listen to a couple of theirs so that the walls break down so that you can leave a review on theirs as well. And yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Zach, so much for this conversation. Thank you to our listeners for listening, staying with us through this episode. Hope we were able to gain something. Hope you're able to learn something. And until next time, right here on the Young Dad Podcast. It says it's stopping. It says it's stopping, but it's